Hi, Principal Matters listeners. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, along with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, and we're going to do a Q&A before we jump into today's conversation with our special guest, Kenny Rodriguez, which this is going to be such a great conversation because we're going to talk about just the power of communication, but also how to use AI in a way to enhance your communication. So hold on for that. Before we do, though, Jen, I'm so glad this question came through one of my surveys with trainings that I did because I just this is a Jen Schwanke conversation I want to have, and I wish we had more than 5 minutes, but here we go. How do you handle the tendency to catastrophize, which can drain energy and focus?
Okay. First of all, let's note that when you and I have 5 minutes, we talk faster. So sorry, listeners, because we just have so many things to say. Okay, I have two answers to this question. And I, by the way, was geeking out when you sent me this question, Will. How do you handle the tendency to catastrophize? My dear friend and colleague Amber asks this flat out up front. Okay, is this a spark or a fire?
Mm.
Thereby making whoever it is think about that. And many times the answer is, okay, it felt like a fire, but it's a spark. Okay, great. Really diminishing that anxiety right away. Okay, so that's one. And I'm not saying you use those words, but maybe you say, okay, is this something we need to do right now? Or is this something that feels like an emergency and isn't? Whatever you do, help the other person or the other group really frame what this is. The second thing about this tendency to catastrophize, and this ties to something we've talked about before, Will, I think someone's tendency to make something gigantic and huge and catastrophic and oh, this is going to affect us forever comes from fear. It comes from not knowing what this means. Am I going to get in trouble? Did I handle something wrong? Are you going to be mad at me? Did I cause problems for someone else? How much work did I just cause you? This is like the people come in your office and say, "Hey, just a heads up." They're not really giving you a heads up. They're looking for reassurance that, um, that I didn't screw anything up and you're okay helping me with this. It's about that fear. And so, I think it's great to ask questions like, okay, where's your fear in this? What is it that's making you anxious? I can see that you think this is a really big deal. Can you break that down for me? And have those conversations that hopefully let a little bit of air out of the tires, bring back that calm. And then that's the final thing I'm going to say before I stop talking so fast. We have to remain calm. My friend Melissa, I think I've said before, always has a way of responding by using the word okay. People will come and say, "We have a problem." And she'll say, "Okay." Or she'll say, "Okay." She says it in such a way that calms. I mean, I almost feel the mercury going down on the thermometer. It's fantastic. She brings the calm.
I'm smiling at everything you're saying because it's also true. And so I'll just add one anecdote, which is I'm just remembering very vividly one morning standing in the student common area where kids would come in and gather and eat breakfast before school. And I like to be out there in the mornings to greet kids and see teachers. And one of my teachers walked up to me and just got real up close to my face and was just like, "Did you know that the printer is broken right now?" And I mean, it was like, it was like, I mean, it was a fire, not a spark.
Right.
And I remember just looking at this teacher and I don't know if I can remember exactly the words I said, but it was something to the effect of, "Bummer, that really sucks."
Right.
And I paused and, and that was my response. And then I just said, "We always have a backup plan. So if you step in and talk to the secretary, we have another printer available in my office that can be used if the teacher's printer is not working, but we'll get technology over here pretty quick to work on it." And it was just funny seeing like the change of expression in the other person's face by me just refusing to go
Right.
there, just like refusing to go there.
Well, and even as you told that story, you probably didn't notice your voice slowed, you calmed, you said, "It's okay. We have a backup plan. Let's go." Right. So it's that tone and that utter complete confidence that it's going to be okay.
So I know that our tendency to catastrophize can be often modified by how we respond. Um, Training other people to do that can be really hard too. So we're not going to go there yet, Jen, but you've got a great book on how to manage conflict. So I want you to plug that book, would you, before we go,
Yeah.
because you lead a lot of presentations on this too.
Yeah, this book surprised me actually with how much it's resonated with people. And it's called The Principal's Guide to Conflict Management. And yeah, it's kind of cool, I think, how many people are really gravitating to some of the things in that book. So take a look if you haven't, and give me a call if you want to talk about it.
That's right. Take a look at it and reach out to Jen when you're ready for that PD because you will not be disappointed. Well, Jen, thank you for the Q&A time. And as we jump into today's episode with Kenny Rodriguez, Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters. And Jen, I know people can reach me at williamdparker.com. How can they find you?
They can find me at jenschwanke.com.
Principal Matters Podcast, episode 425. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. This week, we're going to be talking about the power of engagement with my special guest, Dr. Kenny Rodriguez. Dr. Kenny Rodriguez became superintendent of Grandview School District in July 2016. And before this role, he was the assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction for 2 years, overseeing K-12 curriculum programs and leading schools in the district. Dr. Rodriguez has a diverse career, starting as a music educator for 8 years, then moving into school administration over a decade ago. He has served as an assistant principal, principal director, and assistant soup. He created the first early college high school program in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and directed the Tulsa Innovative School Network. He's also worked on teacher evaluation systems in Oklahoma and Missouri to improve academic achievement. Dr. Rodriguez holds a bachelor's in music ed and a master's in school leadership from Oklahoma State University and a doctorate in school administration from Baker University. And he's married to his wife, Tracy, and they have 2 children, Izzy and Jackson. We have a Jackson at my house too, Kenny. Welcome. Welcome to Principal Matters Podcast. Why don't you fill in the gaps on that intro and tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know about you?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. I think anytime I try to kind of go through, that used to be a lot more truncated when you first get going, and then you start realizing at some point in time, not everybody listens to all the things that you've done over your career. But I think the thing that I always kind of highlight is just, like you said, it's just a diverse background. I think when I first started as being a band director, I wasn't necessarily sure going into school administration. And then once you go into school administration, you realize all the backgrounds and all the things that you have done just continue to build on each other. So I never was going to be a superintendent, but certainly people that were very instrumental in my life to push me and challenge me and to go do those kinds of things. But I'd say just that diverse background and constantly being put in positions to kind of move up to that next step and that next layer, and then taking advantage of that, and then to never stop learning around that. But I do have 2 amazing kids, and both of them graduated from my school district. So that's a unique experience that I don't always put in my bio, but certainly both of them graduating and being able to hand your kids a diploma as they cross the stage is an experience that I never thought that I'd ever have, and something that I think will always be special. And then, like I said, being now been married for over 30 years, and so it's just kind of that's what grounds me and keeps me going on most days. So that's definitely something that's been good. But yeah, this is my end of my 8th year as being superintendent now in this school district, and I'm very proud of the work that we've done.
Well, congrats on all the work you've done. And I also was able to experience graduating my 2 oldest daughters from my school. And it is a wonderful experience to do your work, to be in your work and be with your family at the same time. It's one of the reasons I think people love education so much. Let me set the stage for listeners, because you and I have only known each other for a couple of months, but I feel like we should have known each other our whole lives because
Agreed.
we were introduced by a mutual friend, Matt Wenzel, who is the owner of Libra, HQ.com. They're a sponsor of my show. And in the relationship that we built through Matt, he was just introducing me to you because of just the incredible work you've done with engagement, relationship building, communication in the work you've done as a leader. But you started, I mean, you're from my part of the country. I mean, you grew up in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. You were a Tulsa public school administrator, and we've got some mutual friendships. The late, wonderful Dr. Keith Ballard is somebody that you got to work with directly, and I knew Keith through his work with our state school board association, but also he was the leader of a couple of different districts in this area and a mentor to just hundreds of leaders across the state of Oklahoma. So it's nice to sit in the room with you, Kenny, and feel like I'm with family. But tell us before we get started, because I want to dig into some of what I would call your superpowers. And I know you're going to hate for me to say that, but I want to focus on some of those things that you've really leveraged in your leadership. But before we do that, tell us a little bit more about your district and some of the achievements among your school community you're most proud of.
Sure. I look at my superintendency, in particular in my school district, as two different levels. You kind of have the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and the things that we were able to kind of foundationally build. And by looking at it in those two lenses, and I know a lot of people think of their lives as a pre and post in a lot of different ways, but I'm thankful that I was actually in our district prior to, because I had already built relationships. I already had a understanding of my community and a relationship there, not only with my school board, but with the local community, with the foundations, with the chambers of commerce. And so going into the first couple of years of my superintendency to really build upon those particular components and to really set a foundational approach of what we needed to do. And one of those things was a severe gap in social emotional supports. At that time, obviously, we all knew there were still challenges and things that students needed, but it wasn't as thankfully at that time it was maybe a little bit more of an issue implementing those. Everybody knew that they needed to be done, as opposed to now where it's front and center and thankfully being talked about all the time. But then it still wasn't. And so I had a good board and a vision when I came in that we needed to change what we were doing in our school district. So to be able to implement those things, we had community partners coming in. We started doing social emotional screenings for all of our third, fourth, and fifth graders. And so that's kind of where we started foundationally, just to really start with our early students going into middle school so that we can identify things, identify challenges, identify some behavior, and then make sure that they had supports that they needed of somebody to talk to. That included some family supports when they needed it, but that was one of the first pieces that we really started with. The second component of things that I implemented at that particular time was an emphasis on cultural competence. We've all, at different points in time, interacted with people from different backgrounds than our own. And so this isn't just about race, it's about just any kind of background that necessarily doesn't match ours. And it's still possible to build a positive relationship with somebody that doesn't have that same background. But there are challenges associated with that and things that we have to understand. Yes, there are biases, and yes, there are other things associated with that too. But how do we lay that foundational work? And so I had told the board this is one of the things I wanted to do. Thankfully, they agreed. And we began training our entire staff. So this was our support staff, this was bus drivers, this was everybody in our school district, including our teachers, because they all interact with students in a different way. And so how do we make sure that we're all doing that? And truthfully, it was also so that our staff can interact with each other in a more positive way. So those were the kind of two foundational pieces that I came in with that I wanted to make sure had been around a lot of different things. I'd seen a lot of failed experiments around this of good people trying to do good work that just couldn't finish it. And so I started it a little bit differently to make sure that the board was at the center of it and saying, this is what we think is the right thing to do for our school district. And so then we kind of expanded it from there. Then you fast forward to be in the middle of the pandemic. And so we did academic supports, we were doing curriculum revisions, we were doing all those same things, but I felt like there were a lot of barriers to the academics that were going to inhibit our growth. We couldn't even get to some of those things if we weren't, really addressing some of the behaviors and some of the supports that we needed. Then you go into closure, and thankfully, again, I had the support of my community, and then we were able to reach out and we were giving back. This was our way to give back and say, man, you have supported us, you have done this. Staff, we need to give back to our community. And so we were taking buses just like everybody else and finding ways to give food. They were pulling up. We did drive-throughs at several of our school sites, and we were just giving food to families. We got to see kids. We got to talk to parents and, do it in a safer way. But we at least got to see them and thank them and giving out homework and trying to make sure that they were still being academically challenged. Then you kind of fast forward and going into after the pandemic and really trying to put the pieces together. Thankfully, we already had those other components. So even during the pandemic and the closures, we were still doing support services. Our community partners shifted to a virtual modality since our students were one-to-one. And so they were still able to keep track of what's going on with students. Let me check in with these families. Let me still keep doing these things. So when we came out of the pandemic, we were still adding more community supports because we knew we still needed more of those. We are now K through 12. We have supports at every single one of our school sites. And again, we do put some of those financial supports in place, but it's not just us. It's these community partners that are putting things and saying, hey, this is what we do. We need to provide this for you. We should be in your schools helping your kids and your families. And so we now have 3 and 4 community partners at all these different levels working with us to make sure that they are providing supports for our families and for our kids. That has helped us now coming out of the pandemic. As of 2022, we had already surpassed our academic levels prior to the pandemic. And so, again, when we talk about things I'm proud of, I'm number one proud that we are providing supports for kids and families, that we are, talking about cultural competence in our district and making sure that our kids are what we call future ready and that this is the future that they're looking at. How do we make sure that they're ready for that? But our number one job is as academics and to make sure that our kids are learning. So to be able to come out of that, to make sure that we know, pre-pandemic, our third grade reading levels were around 29%. And, as of last year, we were at 61%. So things like that we can point to physically say, we are building this foundation. And yes, unfortunately, it may take longer than what we maybe envisioned whenever I started this in 2016 and 2017. But building these foundational approaches and this whole continuum, it's exciting now. We just built we're almost finalized our strategic plan now. And getting all these individuals in a room to talk about strategic plan, and we're like, what's important to you? What are the most important things in our school district that we're doing right now that we should keep going? And so this isn't Kenny Rodriguez talking. This isn't my team talking. This isn't us regurgitating what they may have heard me say or whatever. This is our community and all of our partners. And they're all saying the same things. They're saying cultural competence. They're saying social emotional supports. They're saying equity. They're saying all those things that we have been trying to foundationally lay. So I know that it's now no longer about me. It's about this district knowing what they need to do to keep it going. And it's just exciting that everybody's kind of on the same page and really knowing how that this should be continuing to move forward, including academics and including those pieces of literacy and science of reading and all that kind of things, but still to be able to push it forward on those tenets.
Wow, Kenny. So one of the things that I'm reflecting on as you're talking about this is a question that I hear from leaders so often, especially when you look at the landscape of education across the US, the shortage of teachers, the turnover of leadership. And the question is sustainability. Like how do we create sustainable school communities when we have so much volatility, so much instability? And so I'm a summarizer. So I just want to say several things that I heard you say already. When you go back to the beginning of your leadership, you recognize those gaps in social emotional support. You centered your focus on how do we make sure we're identifying where kids need these supports. So you were helping families and students at their most basic needs. And then that shift became that cultural competence among your own staff of internally, how are we having the right conversations so that we are understanding the people whom we're serving and one another in ways where those internal relationships are important and in where you're investing in the right kinds of conversations to know each other, which then leads to the foundational work necessary to do the kind of academic supports that all students need to grow. But in your leadership, all of this happens right in the middle of COVID. So the pandemic hits, and you guys are shifting like everyone else around the US to support services, homework being sent home, providing food. But what you leveraged through that was this community partnership that tied you even closer to the work of what the community was doing to support your school and what the school's doing to support your community. So that after all the smoke clears and we're stepping into 2022, you guys are seeing your academic goals being achieved. You're reaching higher goals than you've reached before academically. And so as you're stepping into 24, 25, now you're looking at, okay, all of this foundational work that's been set for us to get to the place that we are to create a healthy learning environment and community for our schools gives us permission now to dream even bigger. And so I know you and I have talked probably for 10 minutes now at the beginning of the show, but in 10 minutes, and I'm just saying this for the benefit of Principal Matters listeners, for the first 10 minutes of this conversation, you just got a snapshot of what happens in a sustainable leadership model, a leader who's there long enough to try to create the growth and the stability, not alone, but with those community connections, your board connections, your teachers, and your family. So, Kenny, before I step into my next question, what would you add to that summary of how that kind of engagement has led to the opportunities you guys have now? Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Over 1 million teachers use IXL in their classrooms every day for one reason. They love it. Why? IXL is where the magic happens. With just one platform, teachers can personalize learning for every student. IXL gives teachers all the tools they need to enhance and differentiate instruction without adding work to their plates. Plus, IXL has decades of expertise and is proven to be effective. Studies on more than 70,000 schools across 45 states show that those who use IXL outperform others on state tests. Ready to bring the magic to your school? Visit IXL.com/PM to learn more.
Hello, listeners of Principal Matters. Are you a school leader feeling stretched too thin, frustrated with the same old systems? Well, let's shake things up. Join the School X book study with me, Jethro Jones, host of Transformative Principal. This isn't just any old book study. I do things differently. We're going to use game-changing strategies to build a school environment where students and teachers thrive, and so do you. We're talking about designing your school with purpose, reducing stress, and actually leaving work at work. You'll be able to partner with parents, boost school engagement, and use AI as a tool that works for you. Are you ready to lead with intention? Then head on over to jethro.site/will and secure your spot today. That's jethro.site/will.
No, I think what you said in terms of sustainable leadership, I mean, yes, there are so many challenges that we still have on staffing, and we have all the same problems that everybody else has, right? No matter what, we're all facing that exact same thing. But I am blessed to have been in the position for the same amount of time. You mentioned Dr. Keith Ballard and his sustainable leadership over multiple years in that school district, when even he himself had said he was only going to be there for about 3 years. His ability to stay there longer is the reason why that was able to continue, and their system was able to continue to grow. You see it so much, and I know the average tenure of superintendents is low and all that kind of stuff, and you see it from this lens now. I can look back and I can see I was the sustainable piece there, thankfully, because school boards change. I have one member of my school board that was there for me from the very beginning. That's it. The other 6 have all changed over at least once, if not twice. And so you have to continually bring them along too, because they don't have that journey. I summarized all of 8 years in 10 minutes. And so I have to do that with new board members too, because they don't know it from their lens. They just know it of, yeah, I've been a parent in the district that time, but they don't know all those other components of, you don't know what the challenges were. You see the results, which I'm glad that you are excited about, but you don't know the challenges that went along with it. The staff members that didn't think that we should be doing this. Why are we talking about biases? I don't have those challenges right now. We should not be provided. There's too many things that we're doing there. You're taking away academic time. And so to build upon those things and the challenges, there's all those things are associated with it. But I am thankful that to have a sustainable leader, like I have been able to stay in this position for a long amount of time now, more than twice the national average in that particular regard. And so that doesn't always happen. And so I definitely believe that I'm blessed in that regard to have been able to be here and them wanting me to stay here and continue doing that.
Well, I love that. And congratulations on that kind of continuity. I want to stay here because and I like to use analogies. If I'm visiting, for instance, I love to go to Washington, D.C. And so like one of my favorite buildings is the Library of Congress because the architecture, they're so beautiful. I've always said when I'm old enough that I can do something publicly without any embarrassment, you're going to find me one day laying in the floor of the Library of Congress because I've always wanted to just lay and look up. But I'm too embarrassed to do that at this age. So maybe when I'm old enough to not be embarrassed, I'll lay in the floor and look up at the Library of Congress ceiling. But the complexity of something beautiful always begins with the foundation. And so when I look at the complexity of what we just described, Kenny, in the first part of this conversation about what it takes to create that kind of sustainable leadership, let's make it simple because it doesn't begin with that. You don't begin with the end. You begin with foundational work. And part of the reason that I have been so encouraged by your leadership is because of your commitment to communication, relationship building as the foundation for engagement. So help us there for just a few minutes. And I want you to just talk about why that's been such a meaningful part of your leadership.
Well, I think number one is I just felt like that's always what I've done. And it was one of the things I felt like I was good at. And it goes back to my first year of being a teacher. I mean, number one, I always like people. And so, when I was a waiter, it doesn't mean that I liked being a waiter and like that was really what I thought my calling was, but what I loved about it was talking to people. Like I had regulars and I could go around and I could strike up a conversation with anybody, and those were the things that I liked to do. And so building that relationship just seemed to kind of always be something that was easy for me. And then it became with kids, and then it became with parents, and just kind of was always the same person all the time. And so it was never really about acting or being disingenuous. It's just I liked talking to people. I still do. So you get to that point where you realize that's a strength. And so then how do you immediately make those connections with people in a very short period of time? You don't always have an ability to spend an hour with someone to develop a relationship. Sometimes it's a 5-minute conversation that you need to leave them with an impression very quickly of who you are as a person and who you are as a leader. That may be with a parent, that may be with someone else, but taking the time to have a conversation with somebody. We had a parent at one of our board meetings the other night that stayed after, and I didn't know why they were there. And I just went up to them and said, hey, is there, something I can help you with? Introduced myself. And she had a concern, and I sat there and talked to her for a minute. And she sent me an email afterwards, and she said, I can't believe that you took the time after a 2.5 hour, 3 hour board meeting to sit down and talk to me. It's like, yes, that's my job, but I also like talking to people. And if there's a challenge or there's a concern, I don't shy away from listening to those. So I think number one, it's just I always felt like that was a skill that I had and it was an ability. So you should lean into those. If you have those skills and ability, lean into your strengths. Yes, you need to be aware of your weaknesses and make sure that you're addressing those, but lean into those strengths, man. And that was always one of them. So wherever I've gone, I've always done that. My first year in the district, that's the first thing that I do is I'm building relationships. I got to go around and I got to talk to people. And there are foundational people that I met in this district 10 years ago those are my core. Some of them have left, some of them are retired, but many of them are still here. And I've got at least one in every building that I will go to. And I'll just say, hey, let me ask you something. And I don't need you to tell me as the superintendent. I need you to tell me as Kenny that you met 10 years ago. Just tell me what's going on because I just need to know. Well, this is what everybody's saying. And so I think it's valuable to have people that will be completely honest with you because, in these positions, a lot of times you're this title rather than a person. And so anytime that you have that opportunity to still be the person and not the title, I think is valuable to me anyways. That's what's been valuable to my leadership.
I love that. So I love how you talked about your foundational people as your core go-tos because you're right. If you really want to cut through the smoke and figure out what's really going on, you've got to be able to go back to people. And you and I both know this, Kenny, that um, and I'm saying this for listeners because you've experienced this too in leadership. The for whatever reason, the more um, the higher your role is in terms of leadership, I've discovered the less people actually tell you directly what they
Yeah.
really think. And so the
Yeah.
further you get yourself removed from that foundational piece. And so, I love it that you took it all the way back to your service as a waiter, as a band director, as an admin working directly with parents, and now in the role that you have now is you have to find a way to get back to your people and say, okay, what's really going on and stay connected to the pulse of what's happening because otherwise you get insulated from what's really happening too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to transition this a little bit because of the relationship that you and I have with Matt Wenzel from Libra, who introduced us, because Matt has created this really amazing tool through AI that is a way to enhance communication, not replace, but to enhance engagement through communication. And you because you and I have talked offline, I know that you're an early adopter of technology. You've never been afraid of technology. It's something that you've embraced. And so, what are you learning about maximizing engagement through tools like AI, even with trying to maintain multiple and complex relationships?
Sure. Kind of pros and cons too, but what I'd say
Sure.
is, when we started looking at engagement in particular in our school district, kind of taking the last couple of years, we went through a rebranding in 2021 into 2022 and rebranded ourselves as a school district. So again, I've talked foundationally about all these things that have kind of woven itself through, and you finally get to a point where we were far enough along to be able to say, okay, we now have an identity, but everything around us doesn't really match that identity. So let's bring it all together. Now that we have all these foundational pieces, now we're coming out of the pandemic, we're really pushing forward. We rebranded ourselves. We took all of our elementary schools that were all different mascots and things like that, and we unified everybody as one bulldog because we are the Grandview Bulldogs. And so everybody in our district was a bulldog. We got new logos, we got new everything, and just said, this is us, and this is our new vision. And it was preparing all students to be future ready. And so when we did that, that again unified us in a different way as a school district under that one vision and pushing us forward. So then it was really a matter of how do we keep that going and how do we keep engaging our community, but also our staff, and how do we keep that momentum? Because now we're in a spot where recruitment and retention is a major deal. Like not just recruiting people here, because we have a better reputation now than we've ever had. And so we are recruiting people. People know about us now. Whereas when I got in the district, everybody called us the best kept secret. And I kept saying, gosh, if we're a secret, that means we're not talking about it. Why the heck are we not talking about this with everybody that we know? And so bringing that all together and trying to make sure that not only that we're recruiting, but how are we retaining? Because the number one factor that we determined was our staff stay if they really enjoy the teams that they work on. And so that's the difference, is they love the people they work with, and that's what keeps them together. So then how are we as leaders leveraging that? How are we engaging that? And how are we taking advantage of those pieces? Technology for me has always been a way for me to be more efficient with the job that I did. I can go back to being an assistant principal, and my adoption of technology and creating spreadsheets and doing some of the things that I was doing there. The music side was always a part of that too, but it's like, man, I can edit, I can cut, I can do all these things on my computer that nobody else can really do. So something that's going to take somebody 2 hours, I can do in 30 minutes. And we already know there's not enough hours in the day, especially once you get into administration. I get that everybody believes that all we do is sit around and do nothing all day, but there's not enough time in the day to do to do the nothings apparently. So using technology to leverage that and to make sure that we are doing it to make our jobs easier. And so how are we doing that? Well, engagement is still a piece of that. And so how do I, as a superintendent, model this? And so when you take a tool like Libra, and at its core, the easiest piece of it, there's a lot more components to it, but every single day I get a daily digest of what's going on in our district. I know who's has work anniversaries from our district from 20 something years ago through people that are brand new to our district to people who have birthdays that day. So that seems like a very simple thing, and we have about 650 employees. So I probably can't really send personal birthday cards to everybody. I send birthday cards, personal ones that I write on, to my administrators. But this allows me to send a quick email that I've created. So AI gives me a template. I have edited it to sound more like me. And so I get one of these every single day, and then I can send a message. I can immediately send it, or I can edit it. For example, I got one this morning for a counselor at one of our elementary schools. In my mind, this is one of our best counselors. He's a rock star, and he was just on our strategic planning meeting that we had last night. So this is one that I'm not going to just send him my normal message of, hey, heard it was your birthday today. Thanks for all you do for Grandview, that kind of thing. I got to go in there and just send a quick edit of, I hope you know that you are a rock star and thanks for being a part of our strategic planning. So I could just add one more sentence to that same generic thing and then I sent it off. So that was a quick and easy one. The other day, I got one that was a work anniversary to someone who is immersed in some of the biggest groups that we have. And she was celebrating her 27th year with our school district as a work anniversary. So I sent her a quick email and saying, thanks for all your work on Grandview 10. I don't know what we would do without you while it was celebrating her work anniversary. So just like with AI, they say, don't just ask it something and then take what it says, copy and paste it and put it in, because that's disingenuous. But why would we not leverage this tool to be able to do something? I spend literally 3 minutes or 2 minutes, and it's usually right when I'm trying to wake up before I go work out in the gym. And I can do this, and it's really quick and it's done. And I can tell you, I've gotten messages back from paraprofessionals, from bus drivers saying, I can't believe that you took the time today to do that. Now that's at my level. Then you go down to a principal level and you think, gosh, if I knew some of this information quick and easily, again, knowing that my day could go from 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds as soon as I walk into the building, I can send some of these things pretty quickly and easily. Now, the downside is I've got to train my leaders a little bit better on how to personalize it, how to make sure that it doesn't come across as more disingenuous, because that's not you. That doesn't even sound like you. Why did you create that? So how do we do that? That's an ongoing thing since we just first implemented. But I think this is going to give us an opportunity to utilize engagement in a little bit different way than maybe we've had before. And again, it's using AI. It has all the other capabilities, and we can still use the assistant. And it's powered by the highest levels of ChatGPT, and we can do all those same things. The difference that I love about this program, though, is it knows us. So the other day, I put something in and said, hey, I need this in the assistant and stuff like that. And it spit out something, but it knows who I am. It knows that my vision is preparing students to be future ready. And it wove some of those components in, and it made some of those connections. So in my mind, that's a whole different thing that I would have to personally put in there to make the connection. So I just think that's it knows us, that it's behind our kind of firewall, so to speak. And so it felt like a little bit more personal already than just the generic chat GPT.
Well, thanks for that, Kenny. And listeners, if because Libra is a sponsor, I'm going to just sit on them for just a second because I so appreciate Matt and the work he's done. He's a pioneer. So and they're not paying for this episode. I'm just going here because that's how you and I met. And I love to talk about ways to leverage whatever tools that we have towards reaching stronger engagement. But listeners, if you want to check out Libra's website, it's LEBRAHQ.com, and I'll put the link in the show notes. But a couple of things I wanted to reflect on with you, Kenny. One is what you said are the advantages of using AI as a way to quickly be able to identify among all your 650 plus employees, who's experiencing something important today, whether it's a birthday or a work anniversary. How can I reach out to them in the first thing in the morning with just a quick hello across the spectrum of the people that I work with? And that's so important because I was just on the call with a leader yesterday. We were talking about the legacy builders in his school. And I was asking the question, like, how do those people still know that how much you appreciate their legacy? And sometimes people feel very underappreciated. They've put their lives into their schools. And having a superintendent reach out to you on your 27th anniversary at that school would be so encouraging. I can't tell you the number of times when I would leave a note for a teacher that they would come by later just to say how much they appreciated just that small communication. And you would think it wouldn't be that big a deal, but it is a big deal to them. The other side of the coin that you talked about was the challenge, because with anything new in technology, we have to train ourselves how to use it. And you're right. I've discovered the same thing about ChatGPT and AI, which is it is a really great tool for editing or for honing language, but you've got to make it yours. And so my caution to any leaders listening to this is that if you step into the use of any kind of AI tool, you might need to make sure that the finished product is yours, because we're modeling for our teachers and our students how to use something in a way that's still authentically yours, that's ethically yours, that matches the integrity that you have. And so for me, that's an important nuance too. Anything you want to add to that, Kenny?
No, I think the the piece, those are the easy ones. I think the next layer for us really is there's also a way to recognize people across the network. So I can go in and I can see that somebody recognized my director of special education and that her child, who is, I think he's 6, had 3 goals. He had 3 soccer goals one day, and it was a parent moment, and they were all excited, and this was a celebration in their family. And so I can see that someone commented about that. So think of almost like a social media kind of platform that our leadership can see that someone was recognized in some kind of way. That's a more personal kind of way. So then I can go back around and I can say, "Hey, I heard your kid did that." Now, who has time necessarily to do that? The only person I've ever seen being able to do that and remember is Keith Ballard. Keith Ballard is one of those individuals. He remembered everything. He could remember somebody that he met 5 years ago, and then someone gives him like 2 nuggets of where they met, and he goes, "Nope, I remember. And you said this, and your leader was this." I have a pretty good memory, but that is like robotic. I don't know how he ever did that. But that's what it allows us to do, is be able to see those kinds of things. And then you can make it personal. So then you talk about what you just said of we all want to be recognized. So there's one thing to be recognized about work, and then to realize that we all have lives outside of that. And there's going to be things that we're going to celebrate outside of that too. That may sometimes be even more important. I mean, I celebrate the things that my kids do all the time too, right? Like my daughter being a gymnast at one point, and she's now going to be a PT, and she's almost finished with her graduate classes work, and she'll start clinicals. And those are things that people know about me and know about my daughter. And then my son graduating last year and the classes that he's taking and working in IT and other kinds of things. But we celebrate those kind of things, but we don't always know that about each other. So as a leader, to know your building and to know your staff in a way that would be a little bit different. Who doesn't want to work for a leader that way? That's what they always say, right? I always felt, again, going back to the very, very beginning of just me being as personal as I can and building that relationship, is I know what I did. When someone built that relationship with me, man, I'm going to go through a brick wall for that person. Like you ask me for something, I'm there. Like I'm going to do anything that you ever need me to do because I feel like you are investing in me at different times. So I feel like it's the same way. As a principal, you get people that if you built that relationship with them, man, they're going to go through a wall with you. I mean, I had people as assistant principal in a building that, "Hey, I'm coming to you because I know I don't know who else to ask. I need help. Kenny, whatever you need, I'm going to be there." And so those are the kind of people that you leverage. So building that relationship systemically throughout an organization, oh my gosh, how powerful. And talk about recruitment and retention at that particular time. Then they're telling their friends of, no, let me tell you why you want to work here. This is an organization that celebrates this across every platform, like across the entire school district. It's not just one person. This is what we value as an organization. So I think that's what's exciting for me.
We go through brick walls for people who invest in us, and then that kind of culture is contagious. And for listeners who don't understand why Kenny and I keep talking about Dr. Keith Ballard, for those who knew him in the Oklahoma legacy that he built, you're right. I've never thought about this, and I'm not saying this in any way except as a compliment, but Keith Ballard may have been the first embodied version of an AI brain when it came to leadership. And you're right. We don't all possess that same gift, which is being able to just know. You could run into him after 20 years and he would remember your name and your family and all those things. But I don't have that capacity either, Kitty. And so having tools that help you to be able to leverage that kind of experience with people, to just remind you of stuff. And we all use those things on our phones and on Google Calendars. We may not recognize that the technology is helping us, but in this case, being able to leverage that kind of technology around that engagement is so powerful. As we wrap up, I want to ask you this question, because so often when I'm working with aspiring leaders or people that reach out to me through the show because they're trying to find a place where they can just learn as they're stepping into leadership, and I want you to speak to that leader who may either be stepping into their first role, or maybe they're moving into a new role, even if they're an experienced leader. But if you were to sit down with coffee for that leader and you had just a few minutes to say, "Hey, here's the 1 or 2 things I would say keep in mind," Kenny, what's that principle? What are those principles that you would just remind leaders to hold on to in all the noise that they're going to be experiencing in leadership?
Yeah, in particular for first year assistant principals and principals. I mean, I tell our folks, you know, no matter what, if it's an assistant principal role, everything changes. Your perspective changes. Everything's going to change. You're now going to understand more of the things that happened. You're going to reflect on things from the past of people that you may have experienced that you thought that person doesn't know what they're doing as a leader. You may reflect back and you may think, okay, maybe they knew more than I thought. Um, but every experience is going to be it's going to be unique. Learn from every single experience that you get. Um, if you journal. I never was a journaler, but I always made notes and I always wrote things down because somebody as a principal, a veteran principal, told me before I got my first assistant principal job. He told me to write a book. You said you need to write all this stuff down because no one will ever believe you that this stuff actually happened. And he's right. I mean, how many times through a year that we're like, no one would ever believe this is what actually happened today. And it's not always nefarious or anything, but it's just like, who believed that I got a call today that this is what happened? So just be reflective as much as you possibly can because you're going to learn from every one of these experiences. And then just know that it takes time. Um, if I went back and you know I was asked one time, what would you tell your 10-year ago self before you became superintendent? I would say be patient. It's going to take time. You know the adage that I certainly didn't make up of you know sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, and so I use this all the time of we go and there are high expectations and there are kids at you know their lives are at stake and we take that very seriously. But sometimes there's a capacity issue with our staff and we can only do so much so quickly. I usually tell my administrators that I look at things in 3 years. That first year is knowing what's going on. Unless you know the building, it's learning the people, building that relationship as best that you possibly can, knowing within the first 3 months who are your rock stars, who are the ones that are the most influential in the building, which is not necessarily your rock stars, who are the ones that you know you need to leverage in the building to get things done, and do that for year one. Because year two is not very much fun if you're really going to try to make change. That's when you're putting things in place. That's when you're starting to make changes because you've learned everything you needed to do. You've built that leadership, and then you're taking that and getting buy-in, and you're starting to push things in year two because you really want year three to be when things start to finally, you start to see the benefits of what you did in year one and year two. For year three, this is now becoming my building. It's not about, well, the previous leader didn't, and well, the last assistant principal didn't, or whatever. This is now my role and what that. Now, we don't always get that opportunity to be in the building for 3 years, but think of that in those kind of terms of year one is all about relationships, learning what's happening, and there may be one or two things that you have to change really quickly. This is emergency. I'm going to change this. I don't have enough chips in the bank to be able to do this, but I'm going to earn chips by showing that I'm decisive. This is an immediate need, and we're going to make this change. My first year as assistant superintendent in this district, I wasn't even here for 3 months, and I eliminated all of our interim testing because the test that we were using, the first thing that I heard was it takes too much time. It's way too of an intense process, and the results had nothing to do and no correlation with the state assessments. I said, then why are we doing it? Well, I don't know, because we just always have. So the first thing I did was I eliminated it. So we're just not going to do them. They're not worth it. They're not helping anything, and they're taking away time from instruction. Now, I didn't have any chips in the bank to do that, but it was an easy thing to do, and it made logical sense. And I gained immediate chips as being a decisive leader, seeing that there was an immediate problem and making that change. And then I gained chips that then I utilized the next year, saying, okay, so now we did this. What are we replacing it with? Well, that's too, it's going to be, no. Now remember, we eliminated that so that we could add this because we still need to know where our students are. And now we do 3 times a year. We look at growth, and we've changed that entire process in 10 years. But sometimes you have to make immediate changes, but relationships. That year one, when you first get there, man, they are going to be worth their weight in gold. But like I said, figure out who your rock stars are because you got to keep them happy. But you also need to know who are your influencers in that building because they're not necessarily your rock stars always.
Well, Principal Matters listeners, push pause And then I want you to rewind to the last 5 minutes and listen to it again and again and again, because there's so much wisdom in that, Kenny, about building those relationships and then making those meaningful changes based on what you learned about those relationships and processes, and then stepping into that year 3 of seeing the benefits of making this your role. You're a part of this community now. Wow, there's so much wisdom there. How can listeners stay connected with you? I know they can find you at your school's website or through social media, but if someone wants to reach out to you because they would love to collaborate or learn more from you, how can they do that, Kenny?
Yeah, I mean, too many years of being in large districts and going through, I'm pretty anal retentive when it comes to all those things. So I'm a huge X guy, so Twitter. Certainly, at K Rodriguez, you got to spell my last name right. So that's a challenge for you there, but you can look that up. But I'm out there a lot on that, but certainly they could always send me an email, and you're welcome to put my email address and anything that you want. I love reaching out when talking to people. And again, it's back to that. Like, I love building relationships with people. And there were so many people in my life that have invested in me, that are still investing in me to this day. Don't ever think that you can't call those people just because you get to be an assistant principal or principal or whatever. As a sitting superintendent, I was still calling those people saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Where am I wrong? What am I missing? You always want that. And you always, even if it's just to say, you're right, keep going. Sometimes just that encouragement. So don't ever think that you can't still keep calling those people that invested in you. But I love investing in people because, again, they did that with me. So if there's anything that I could possibly do, I'm in.
Well, Dr. Kenny Rodriguez, thank you so much. And I will put a link to your Twitter account, your email, and your school website in the show notes so listeners can reach out to you directly. But thank you for giving me so much of your time and being so generous with our listeners today, just talking about the history of your own work, the great things that are happening in your district, and giving us a lot of feedback to think about in terms of how we can enhance our own power of engagement through relationships, that face-to-face interaction, but also leveraging technology in a way to make that even more powerful. So I appreciate your work. Thank you for doing incredible service to your school community. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You'll find free resources like this one at williamdparker.com. Subscribe for our free weekly newsletter, which contains bonus material, and also check out the links for Grow Academies, Masterminds, Executive Coaching, and Keynote presentations from my books, as well as from Principal Matters Associates. You can find out more under our speakers tab at williamdparker.com. Thank you for learning together, and thank you for doing what matters.